The boy stood alone in the square. His clothes were dirty. His hands trembled slightly at his sides. People stopped to stare. Some laughed. Others watched from a distance, unsure what to make of him. He looked to be around 16 years old enough to know who he was, and old enough to know where he came from. Yet when people tried to speak with him, his answers made little sense. He could barely communicate. He struggled to walk properly, and when the authorities searched for his family, they found nothing. No parents, no records, and no explanation. Only a frightened boy carrying a letter and a mystery that would puzzle Europe for generations. Welcome to Kaspar Hauser. The authorities eventually escorted the boy away from the growing crowd. At first they assumed he was simply lost, perhaps a traveller, or perhaps a runaway. But the longer they spent with him, the stranger things became. He seemed fascinated by ordinary objects, a candle flame, a window, the sound of horses passing through the street. Simple things that most people barely noticed appeared completely new to him. Communication proved difficult. The boy could repeat only a handful of words and phrases. One of them was his name, Kaspar Hauser. The other clue came from the letter that he carried with him. They were addressed to a local cavalry captain named Friedrich von Weisenegg. When the letters were examined, they raised more questions than answers. According to their contents, the boy had supposedly been raised in isolation for most of his life. The writer requested that Kaspar be accepted into military service just as his father had been before him. To the officials reading them, the story sounded almost impossible to believe, yet there was the boy standing before them, living proof that something about this story was very unusual. In the days that followed, Kaspar became the subject of intense curiosity. Officials continued trying to learn more about him. Doctors examined him and teachers attempted to educate him. Visitors arrived simply to see the mysterious boy for themselves, and the more people observed him, the stranger he seemed. His sense of balance was poor, bright sunlight appeared to bother him, and loud noises often startled him. Foods that most people enjoy, he refused to eat. Yet despite his difficulties, Kaspar learned quickly. Words soon became sentences, and sentences eventually became conversations. And for the first time, people were finally able to ask the question that had been on everyone's mind since the day he arrived. Where had he come from? For a while, Kaspar avoided the subject, or perhaps he simply didn't know how to explain it. But eventually, he began to tell his story. As Kaspar's ability to communicate improved, he began sharing fragments of his past. At first, the details seemed difficult to believe. According to Kaspar, he spent most of his childhood inside a small room, a room he claimed was barely large enough to lie down in. He said he'd never seen another person, never walked through a town, and never stood beneath the open sky. The room contained little more than a straw bed and a few wooden toys. Food would appear beside him while he slept. Water was left for him to drink, but whoever brought it was always gone before he awoke. If Kaspar's story was true, then years of his life had passed in complete isolation. No family or friends, and no education, and no understanding of the world beyond the walls of that tiny room. To many who heard it, the story sounded impossible, yet it seemed to explain so much. Why sunlight bothered him, why ordinary objects seemed to fascinate him, and ultimately why a teenage boy had arrived in Nuremberg knowing almost nothing about the world around him. Not everyone accepted Kaspar's story, however. While some saw him as a victim, others began to question parts of his account. Critics pointed out that surviving alone for so many years seemed unlikely. Others questioned how someone supposedly raised in complete isolation could learn as quickly as Kaspar appeared to. And so, rumours began to spread. Perhaps the mysterious teenager was not a prisoner at all. Perhaps he was an orphan, a runaway, or something else entirely. For the first time since arriving in Nuremberg, Kaspar found himself at the centre of a growing debate. not about where he had come from, but whether he was telling the truth. As the debate surrounding Kaspar continued, a new theory began to circulate, and unlike the others, this one reached far beyond the streets of Nuremberg. Some believed Kaspar was not an abandoned child at all. They believed he was royalty. Specifically, the missing heir to the House of Baden, one of the most powerful noble families in Germany. According to the theory, a young prince had supposedly died in infancy years earlier. But rumours persisted that the child had never died, that he'd been secretly removed and hidden away and replaced. Now, if that was true, the reason was simple. Royal succession determined who inherited power, influence, and wealth. A missing heir could change the future of an entire noble family. And if Kaspar really was that missing child, there may have been people who benefited from him never being found. If those rumours were true, then Kaspar's story took an entirely different meaning. The mysterious room, the years of isolation, the unknown identity. None of it would have been an accident. It would have been a cover-up, a way of removing a legitimate heir from history. However, there was no proof, there were no documents, and no witnesses willing to confirm it, yet the theory refused to disappear. And the more people discussed it, the more famous Kaspar Hauser became. For the next few years, Kaspar attempted to build a normal life. He continued his education, made new acquaintances, and remained one of the most discussed figures in Germany. Yet the questions surrounding him never truly disappeared, and neither did the rumours. Then, in December 1833, everything changed. Kaspar returned home with a serious stab wound to his chest. Weak and visibly distressed, he claimed he'd been lured to a meeting in a local garden. There, he said, a stranger had approached him. Moments later, he was attacked, and by the time Kaspar returned home, it was clear the injury was serious. Doctors were called, friends gathered around him, and as news spread through the town, concern quickly turned to fear. For years, Kaspar's identity had been the subject of rumours, theories, and endless debate. Now many wondered whether they were watching the final chapter of the mystery unfold. Despite medical treatment, his condition continued to worsen. 3 days later, on December 17, 1833, Kaspar Hauser died from his injuries. He was 21 years old. The boy who had appeared from nowhere had taken his answers with him. Nearly 200 years later, the mystery of Kaspar Hauser remains unresolved. Was he really a child raised in isolation? Was he the victim of a political conspiracy? Could he have been the missing heir to the House of Baden? Or was he simply a troubled young man whose story grew larger with every retelling? Over the years, historians, investigators, and even modern DNA studies have attempted to uncover the truth. Some theories have been weakened and others remain stubbornly alive. Yet no explanation has managed to answer every question. And perhaps that's why this story is so fascinating. Not because we know who Kaspar was, but because we don't. He was a young man who appeared from nowhere. He lived beneath a cloud of speculation. And he died before the mystery could ever be solved. If you enjoy this mystery, please consider liking, subscribing, and ringing the bell. And if you have your own theory about who Kaspar Hauser really was, leave it in the comments below. So remember, until next time, question everything, keep safe, Toodles.